There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it swallows it. It sits beside you in the cafeteria. It follows you at parties you weren't really invited to. It lies in bed with you whispering they only talk to you because it's polite. And when you laugh a little too loudly in a group chat just to feel heard, it smirks and says they're only tolerating you. This is not the story of someone who's always been alone. It's the story of someone who learned how to stop believing they had to be. This is a story about Alex. And if you've ever wondered how do you learn how to make friends when you've spent years believing you weren't worth one, this one's for you. Let's begin. Alex was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, even the obscure ones. Co-worker from 3 jobs ago, April 7th. Childhood neighbor's dog, August 2nd. His own forgotten last year. Again. But that's the thing about people like Alex. They're walking empathy maps tuned into every detail around them, but perpetually unsure how to draw the same attention back to themselves. Not because they didn't want connection, but because they didn't believe they had permission to ask for it. Alex wasn't introverted. Not really. He wanted to talk, to laugh, to be part of something. But every attempt felt like throwing a paper airplane into a wind tunnel. Brief hopeful, and then suddenly lost. High school had been a minefield. College a blur of missed opportunities and faces that blurred into years. By his late 20s, friendship had become something he admired in others, the way you admire an art piece beautiful but protected by glass. He knew the choreography. He had read the books, ask open-ended questions, smile often, mirror their energy. God, he had tried, but no one ever taught him how to feel wanted in a room he had to fight so hard just to be invited into. So, most days ended the same. A small dinner. A show paused mid-episode. His phone resting silently beside him like a sleeping pet, loyal, quiet, and rarely ringing unless it was an app notification. He'd scroll Reddit, hoping for posts that felt like a mirror. IWTL. How to make friends. That one stopped him. It wasn't the first time he'd typed those exact words into Google. But this time, seeing someone else say it blunt, unpolished, raw, it hit differently. The replies, the kindness in them, the honesty. It made him ache. There were others, just like him. And that meant maybe, just maybe he wasn't broken, just unreached. Still, there was a bitter kind of comfort in loneliness when it becomes predictable. Like a worn sweater with too many holes, it doesn't warm you anymore, but it's yours. You know how to live inside it. That was Alex's world. Until a text came in at 11:03 p.m. one Friday night. Hey, I'm hosting a board game night tomorrow. If you're free, Totally Chill Group would love to have you. It was from Marcus, a guy from work. Friendly, always said hi in the elevator. Alex froze. He stared at the message. His heart began its usual anxious routine, racing like a bird flung against a window. He didn't know these people. What if he said something weird? What if they already had inside jokes? What if they were just being polite? What if... He went. That night, Alex barely slept. He paced. He rehearsed conversations. He imagined walking in and everyone stopping to stare. He imagined sitting alone while the others leaned into each other like puzzle pieces. But buried under the noise was something smaller and strangely louder. What if it doesn't go badly? The next day, Alex stood in front of the mirror for longer than usual. He changed shirts 3 times. He looked himself in the eye and whispered, "You don't have to be perfect. Just be real." That sentence. It didn't fix anything, but it made something shift. Like the tiniest click in a locked door. He grabbed his keys, and he left the house. That's the thing about courage. It rarely looks like a movie scene. Most of the time, it looks like showing up when your stomach is tying knots. It looks like saying yes when your brain screams no. Alex rang the doorbell, and that's where things begin to change. The door opened with a creak that felt louder than it should have been. Inside, warm light spilled across a carpet that had definitely seen better days, and the faint scent of takeout lingered in the air. Soy sauce, something vaguely spicy, maybe orange chicken. Marcus greeted him like they'd been friends since third grade. "Dude, you made it." No hesitation. No awkward glance at his watch like he hadn't expected Alex to show. Just wide eyes, an easy smile, and a clap on the shoulder that said, "I'm glad you're here." And just like that, the door stayed open, not just literally, but symbolically. There was room here. Inside were 5 others, all strangers. And that realization came with a surprising comfort. Everyone here had once been the new person. Everyone had a first game night. Everyone had fumbled a name. He nodded, tried to smile, and muttered something about traffic. There hadn't been any. The night rolled on in pieces. Small introductions, a poorly explained card game that made everyone laugh. Someone spilled soda and they all laughed harder. The walls that Alex always felt pressed against walls of self-doubt, second-guessing, tightly wound silence didn't vanish. But they didn't hold him in place either. He was tentative, careful, listening more than speaking. But Marcus checked in subtly without drawing attention. "You good," he'd whisper between turns. And Alex would nod. Not just to Marcus, but to himself. It was the first time in a long time that he didn't feel like he was earning his place. He just was. And for someone like Alex, that was revolutionary. But connection isn't a lightning bolt. It doesn't strike and change your world in one flash. It's a drip. A slow, steady leak that over time wears down the thickest walls. Alex left that night with a text from one of the others. "Fun hanging with you. Next time I'll teach you how to actually play Dominion." The message didn't change his life, but it lingered longer than the silence that usually followed his evenings. He went to the next one, and the next. They weren't magic. He still felt awkward sometimes, still overanalyzed the things he said on the drive home. But he kept going. And every time he stayed a little longer, spoke a little louder, laughed a little easier, he started to see Marcus at work differently too. The elevator small talk became deeper. They started grabbing coffee during lunch. Then came casual hangs at the park, a late-night walk after a movie, a shared playlist, a conversation about childhood dreams under flickering streetlights. It was real. But even as things began to bloom, the old doubts never fully left. That's the cruel part of being someone who's lived without deep friendships for so long. You start wondering if it's sustainable, if they really like you, or if it's just convenient for now. That thought came crashing in one night when Marcus canceled plans last minute. "Sorry, man, something came up. Rain check." 2 sentences. No big deal. But for Alex, it felt like a trap door opening under everything he'd built. The old narrative came screaming back. "You tried too hard. You talked too much last time. You're not fun. You're not needed. You're not wanted." He didn't reply. Not for hours. Instead, he sat in the quiet of his apartment staring at his phone like it was mocking him. He had dipped his toe in connection, and now he was ready to retreat. It was safer in the shallow. But somewhere inside, another voice, quieter but more honest, started to whisper. "You are not the sum of one canceled plan. You are allowed to feel disappointed without unraveling. You've come further than this." He texted back, "No worries. Hope everything's okay. Hit me up when you're free." Then he did something radical. He called up someone else from the game nights, just to talk, and she picked up. They talked for an hour, about nothing and everything. She didn't know she was saving him, but in a way, she was. That moment taught Alex something he hadn't realized before. Friendship isn't one person saving you from loneliness. It's learning how to be open so that more than one person can. It's not about being liked by everyone. It's about being known by someone. And that's a shift that rewires the whole machine. Alex began to reach out more even when it felt strange. Not always with big things. Sometimes it was a meme. Sometimes just a, "Hey, this song made me think of you." But what mattered was that he was learning to believe something fundamental. He had value to offer. Not just his time, not just his attention, but his presence, his weird observations, his laugh that came from the chest, his stories about pigeons that kept nesting on his balcony. And in offering that, people responded. Friendships didn't flood in like a tidal wave, but they trickled, steady, reliable, and real.
What I'm describing here
but as Alex grew more connected to others, he also began to notice something deeper. He wasn't just learning how to be a friend to them. He was learning how to be a friend to himself.
But the reason it
and that was a whole different journey.
is because we're used
Somewhere
to
along the
lapsing
way,
into
Alex stopped
multitasking
rehearsing
out of desperation.
conversations
We're in a hurry.
mirror.
We want to do everything
Not
at
because the
once.
anxiety vanished, but because
If we were
he'd started
willing
to
to
trust his
slow
own voice
multitasking
even when it
down,
trembled. He could walk
we
into
might
a room
find
now and not
that it
pre-script
works
every
quite
possible
brilliantly.
response to.
So
what
imagine
do
that
you
feeling
do?
of working on a crossword
He could
puzzle,
sit in silence
and you
during
can't
a
figure
group
out the
hangout
answer.
and
the
not
reason you
feel
can't
like he was
is 'cause
failing
the
at
wrong
social
answer is
interaction.
stuck in your head.
But just when you
It's very
think you're
easy.
finally
Just go and
becoming
do
who
something
you
else.
were always meant to
Switch
be,
topics,
life, in its
switch
clever
context,
little way,
you'll forget the wrong
sends you a
answer,
mirror.
and that gives the right
One
answer space
you didn't
to pop
ask
into the
for.
front of your mind.
One that doesn't flatter. For Alex, that mirror came at a friend's birthday dinner. A long table clinking glasses inside jokes firing across plates of pasta. He was seated near the end close enough to hear the laughter, too far to be part of it. No one meant to exclude him, but old patterns whispered otherwise. The moment came when someone from across the table shared a wild story from college. The whole group leaned in, roared with laughter past drinks like currency in a world he'd never lived in. Alex smiled, quiet, polite, but his throat tightened. They had history, a thread he couldn't follow, memories he wasn't part of. In that moment, he didn't feel left out. He felt invisible. That night, he didn't cry, didn't spiral, but he felt something he hadn't felt in months, disconnected, not from the world, but from himself. Like a house that had started to feel like home suddenly flickered under a power outage. He walked home in silence, through the park, past the same streetlights that once felt like company. He sat on a bench and exhaled the kind of breath that only comes from being almost okay. And there, in the soft dark, Alex asked the question he'd avoided for years. What if I never felt safe growing up? It came out like a thought from someone else, but it landed with the weight of a truth he'd carried since childhood. Because when you grow up walking on eggshells or waiting for the day your presence becomes a burden, you learn to make yourself smaller, quieter, more useful. You become excellent at supporting others and terrible at letting yourself be supported. You become Alex, and you confuse friendship with performance. That night he remembered being 9 years old standing at the edge of a playground while the other kids played tag. He remembered laughing too hard at a joke just to be noticed. He remembered being told by a parent, "People are only nice to you if you're useful." He remembered trying to be useful, all the time. He'd been looking for connection, but carrying a core belief that he had to earn love, not receive it freely. And that belief, it shaped every hi he hesitated to say. Every wanna hang out he never sent. Every joke he buried because he wasn't sure it would land. That night on the park bench, Alex wasn't just grieving loneliness. He was grieving the version of himself that had survived it for so long. And like all grief, it came with clarity. He didn't need to be in every conversation. He didn't need to know everyone's history to be worthy of a future. He didn't need to prove he was lovable. He was lovable. The hard part wasn't learning how to make friends. The hard part was believing he deserved them. And that was a wound no dinner party could fix. That was healing that had to begin inward, gently, honestly, and with terrifying self-compassion. He began therapy. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a last resort. It was a choice. a gift to himself, a way to untangle the wires he'd been tripping over for decades. And in those sessions, he started naming things he'd once buried. The fear of being too much, the exhaustion of being not enough, the fatigue of trying to manage how others felt so he could feel okay, the quiet anger at a world that praised independence but punished vulnerability. He didn't transform overnight, but slowly his voice stopped shaking when he expressed a need. He stopped apologizing when he took up space. He started saying things like, "I actually don't feel up for it tonight," without a wave of guilt crashing in after. He began to trust that the right people would understand. And if they didn't, he'd be okay. That shift didn't make friendships easier, but it made him stronger, grounded, rooted. The next birthday dinner. He still sat near the edge. The group still swapped stories he didn't share. But this time, he leaned into a quieter conversation with the person beside him, and it was good, real, present. And most importantly, he didn't leave feeling less than, because something had changed. He no longer needed to be in the center to feel seen. There's a difference between being part of something and feeling like you're part of it. Alex knew that now. And as the months passed, the shift was no longer just internal, it showed up in how he moved through the world. He stopped hovering on the edge of group texts, unsure whether to chime in. He stopped rehearsing what to say before hitting send. He'd just say it, as himself. Messy, kind, enough. And people responded not always with fireworks, but with presence. He wasn't just invited anymore. He was expected, missed when absent, teased with affection, trusted with stories people didn't share easily. Still, something in him remained curious, restless, as if now that he could breathe again, he was finally ready to stretch. He wanted more than belonging. He wanted community. Not just to be invited, but to initiate. Not just to join, but to create. So he tried something bold. He hosted. The very idea once made his palms sweat. What if no one showed up? What if they came and hated it? What if they came, smiled, and never returned? But he did it anyway. Game night, his apartment, chips, Spotify on low volume, a mismatched collection of mugs and folding chairs. He texted the invite with trembling thumbs and pressed send before he could talk himself out of it. 7 people came. 7. They filled the tiny space like they were meant to be there. Someone brought brownies. Someone brought an extra chair. Marcus hugged him at the door and said, "You look terrified." Alex grinned. "I am." And then they laughed. That night was loud, full of stories, wrong rules, spilled drinks, and accidental group photos. No one knew where the tape was. No one cared. They were building something better than perfection. At one point, Alex stepped into the kitchen to refill a bowl of chips and just stood there for a moment, listening. The sound of conversation, of jokes overlapping, of people choosing to be in his space, not because he begged them to come, not because he was useful, but because they wanted to be with him. He felt it in his chest like a slow bloom, not fireworks, but a gentle sunrise. He belonged, but something even more powerful was happening. He was becoming someone that others could belong with. After that night, the texts came more often. Not just from Marcus or close friends, but from the fringes, the ones like him, the quiet ones, the awkward ones, the "I don't usually do this, but" ones. He recognized himself in them, and so he said yes, even when it felt like a stretch, especially then. He began checking in on people not to get something back, but because he genuinely cared. He learned birthdays and showed up with cake. He offered rides when someone needed help moving. He sent playlists during breakups and awkward memes during job interviews. He started becoming the kind of friend he always wished someone had been to him. And here's the magic in that. When you give love freely, not to be chosen, but because you've chosen yourself. The universe has a way of circling it back. One day, at another hangout, someone tapped him on the shoulder. A girl named Renee, new to the city, unsure why she was even there. She smiled and said, "Hey, I'm glad you invited me. I've had a hard time making friends and this felt different." Alex looked at her and smiled because he knew that feeling. The emptiness, the uncertainty, the fear of being too late to learn the language of connection. And he said, "You're not alone. I used to feel the same way." He meant it. Because once he had sat where she was sitting, and now he could be the mirror that showed others who they really were, not broken, not behind, just unreached. He'd become the space he once searched for. It's strange how we expect closure to feel like a slam of a door, something final, clean. But most of the time it arrives as a whisper, a slow release, a truth we've always known but are only now ready to hold. For Alex, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday morning in the most unremarkable way possible. A voicemail. He had just woken up, hair a mess, one sock on coffee brewing. The notification blinked softly, one new voicemail, Mom. He hadn't spoken to her in over a year. Their relationship had been complicated. Warm when it was easy, distant when it wasn't. She wasn't cruel, just afraid. Of vulnerability. Of feeling too much. And she'd passed that fear down like a family heirloom wrapped in lessons about not crying in public, not trusting people too much, not expecting to be chosen. It wasn't malicious, just inherited pain. He pressed play. Her voice trembled. She asked how he was. Told him she saw an old photo of him age 11, Halloween, in a wizard costume he'd made from a curtain. She said she missed him. Said she was proud, said she was sorry. Alex sat down, and he cried. Not just for the words, but for all the years they would have meant something. For the kid in the photo who thought maybe he was too weird, too much, too loud, too soft. The kid who started to believe that friendship was something other people knew how to do. He cried for the silence he had mistaken for truth. And then he breathed. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a release. The kind that says, it's okay now. You don't need to carry this forever. Later that week, he told Marcus about it. They were walking the trail behind their apartment complex, mist clinging to the edges of the trees like memory. Alex shared the voicemail, the tears, the curtain cape, and Marcus listened quietly, fully. And when Alex finished, Marcus just said, "I'm proud of you, man. You're building something none of us had growing up, and you're doing it with open hands." Alex didn't know what to say, so he nodded. And for once that was enough, because that's what growth looks like. Not just louder laughter or more parties or perfectly filtered Instagram memories, but stillness, safety. The kind where someone says, "I'm proud of you," and you believe them. Not because they're supposed to say it, but because you've become someone worth saying it to. The word friend used to feel so foreign to Alex, heavy, mysterious, like a language he could never fully translate. Now it felt like home. And with that came a quiet revelation. He was never trying to learn how to make friends. He was trying to learn how to let himself be loved. That was the real journey. Because at the heart of every hand extended, every text sent, every game night hosted, every awkward smile returned, was this question echoing quietly under it all. Am I allowed to be seen? And the answer finally softly was yes. He was. He always had been. Now he believed it. So when he looked at Renee across the table or walked beside Marcus under the trees or saw someone else typing IWTL, how do you make friends? On a late night Reddit scroll, he didn't feel like a bystander anymore. He felt like someone who had crossed a bridge, slowly, unevenly, but fully. And now He could offer others a hand across because this story isn't just about Alex, it's about you, the one watching, the one wondering if it's too late, if maybe you're too awkward, too broken, too invisible, too something. You're not. You're not too anything. You're just waiting. Waiting to believe you don't have to be alone anymore. Waiting to reach, to try, to speak even if your voice shakes. Waiting to stop surviving your life and start belonging in it. This isn't the end. It's just the next beginning. If this story touched something in you, if you saw yourself in Alex or someone you love, don't let it stop here. Someone you know might be waiting for a hand, a text, a seat at the table. Be the one who sends it. And if you're still learning how to stick around, there are more stories coming, more people like you, and we're building something here, together. Subscribe, share, and come back. The door's open, always.